Yes, my name is Adam, but we're not talking about this Adam. We're going to go all the way back to the garden.
Let's dissect it.
Welcome to the DNA Bodcast. I'm Adam Ranney.
And I'm Dr. Dylan.
Well, yep, my name is Adam. I like to tell people when they ask what my name is, I tell them I have the oldest name on the planet, which is kind of true, right?
I never thought of that way.
Yeah, there you go. You'll never forget, and that's why I tell people that. Well, today, this episode today, we're going to probably part one and part two this one. We want to dig into something that I feel like the Lord showed me as it pertained to the way God created us, right? The Bible tells us we're made from the dirt of the earth. We're just these glorified dirt bags, right? The sinful part of us we're like a dirt bag until he gets his hands on us, and then he puts his water on us, and he makes us, he creates us, he molds us, he shapes us, and then next thing you know, we are made in his image, and he makes us to look like him, and he's created us to physically, spiritually, emotionally. We're going to constantly drive that on this show. The spiritual, the emotional, the physical, all these things. Why? Because God created all these parts to work together. This is why he tells us in Romans 8:28, I work all things together for the good of those who love me, who are called according to my purpose. He's constantly in the motion of making and creating. He's not a God that lives in the past. He's constantly, even though he can hold it, he holds our world. He's not bound in time. He holds all of it. So he holds our past, he holds our present, he holds our future. Mm-hmm. The beauty in that is then it means he has the ability to take all things pertaining to where we've been in life, the hurts, the sorrows, the great days, the joys, all the big things. He can take those in concert with your today, mold and shape those back into something, and that makes still your tomorrow worth fighting for. Mm-hmm. I had this revelation in God's word a couple years ago, and I was talking to Dr. Dylan about it. And so what we want to do is get into the fascinating idea and thought that in the garden, man is made from the dirt of the earth. I had a conversation with my mother once, awesome woman of God. She did some scientific research. She was looking into the different soils and discovered there are 5 soils on the earth today. There's red, there's white, there's black, there's brown, and there's yellow. Isn't that interesting? Those are also the same colors of humanity. So from the garden, God formed all the colors of humanity, the beautiful pictures of all of our different melanins and all of our different skin tones and our hair and our facial features and all of that. He formed and created from this place, the Garden of Eden. What's interesting about the Garden of Eden, it says a main river flowed through the garden, and from that main river, 4 other rivers came out, branched out. And all of a sudden, one day I'm sitting there and I said, oh my goodness, the Garden of Eden is a huge picture of a human heart. The Bible tells us that from the heart flow the issues of life. The Bible tells us, above all things, guard your heart. Could it be that he's telling us to not just guard it spiritually and emotionally, but also physically? And today, what we want to talk about are the things that God set in motion from the beginning. Mm-hmm. I love the idea that God, the creator of the universe, at his core is a gardener. Why? And here's what's interesting. In the Old Testament, in that time in the Garden of Eden, when man and humanity sinned and fell short and took of that forbidden fruit, it was in the garden that separation from God took place. Also, though, in that moment, God made a plan that fast. And he says to Eve, he says, your seed will crush the head of the serpent. Fast forward, here's Jesus, the seed from a woman in a Garden of Gethsemane. And he's praying, and the Bible notates there he crushes the head of the serpent. So God made a plan in a garden, began to redeem mankind in a garden. Mm-hmm. What's interesting is, from that dirt that we're created from, that earth that we're created from, that image that we're shaped and made into, here's what's crazy, Dr. Dylan. When I begin to look at that, I begin to think through the way he designed us. And at God's core, when Jesus died and that stone was rolled away And when Martha, I believe, was the first one there, ran upon, and it said she was met by Jesus, but she didn't know it was him. And he said, "Who are you looking for?" And she said, the Bible says in one translation that she mistook him for the gardener. Isn't that interesting? He was buried in a garden tomb. And the first time after resurrection, I see it as he's seen as his true self. Always the gardener, always caring about what is going on in the soil of our life. Dr. Dylan, you have seen on the medical side of things how it runs into like these rivers, how they would touch each other, overflow. One of them, its banks overflowed, right? You see how the medical side of things are sometimes the overflow of an emotional side of things, or from a spiritual. You might be angry at God for some things, or you don't understand why he's doing what, or why he allows certain things in our life. Those things become banks that either feel dried up. And here's one last reference to the Old Testament, is that it says when the temple is put into place and when God's presence is restored back to it, it gives this picture. It says, from that temple flows a river. And from that temple, it begins to saturate the ground. And then everything from the temple, when the temple is in alignment, everything else begins to flourish. Why? Because that water begins to flow. That's a big opener.
That was quite a bit.
I want to get into the fabric of this idea of God being the great gardener. You and I were talking before this show, and there's so many different things that can be seen as seeds, right? From the type of food we just talked about past show, about foods that we eat. Those are like storing seeds into this soil, and then it manifests what we put in it. Correct. It grows what we put in it. Talk to us today about this idea, this creative designer who at his core is like a methodical gardener, constantly looking for the weeds, caring for our heart. I as a patient of yours now, I feel like that's what you do with me and all the people that I know. It's as if when you watch him, how he does it, his hands are just constantly looking for, what are the weeds? What are the things? And how did those get there? And how do we get those out of there? Let's talk about that today. How this soil is a garden. And what are the seeds that are good for us? But what are some of the things that create seeds that create weeds?
Okay. That's a good perspective.
Can we dissect that today?
Yeah. So it's funny you say that, because it's essentially like the way we look at it is the brain and the heart interact kind of like those old TVs with the rabbit ears, right? Some of the kids nowadays, they probably don't know what that is, but right, you can be on the right channel, but the rabbit ears aren't quite right. So you get this fuzzy picture, right? This pixelation, or like a seediness maybe to the picture, we can call it, right? And so the body's kind of the same way, is that when it gets obstructed or the weeds grow, right, you get this fuzzy picture of yourself from a physical standpoint, an emotional standpoint, and a spiritual standpoint. And so within that, if you allow these weeds to keep growing, they will outgrow the ecosystem, right, and cause disruption and cause issues throughout the body. So again, you could eat, say, something that you're sensitive to, you don't break down well. We talked about people that maybe have MTHFR or MTHFD, different genetic SNPs, we call them, where they don't process folic acid well. So if you're continuously eating something you're allergic to or sensitive to or unable to process efficiently, right, this graininess, this fuzziness, these weeds will continue to grow and grow and grow until eventually your body no longer knows what's going on, right? You see maybe, right, a house that's been unkempt or untaken care of for a long time, right? There's weeds growing throughout the whole yard. They're as tall as the person is or as tall as the house, crazy things. And you think, oh man, I don't want to be around that person or go near that thing, because who knows what's inside. The body will have the same concept. Is it could lead to heart disease, which is the leading cause of death here in the United States, simply by having a deficiency or eating things that you're sensitive to, letting these seeds grow into weeds and not managing them.
Heart disease. Unfold that more. That to me, think about it. The garden looks like a heart.
Yes.
And yet, wouldn't it make sense? Think about it. You're going to hear it constantly on this show. What is the enemy's goal? To kill, steal, and destroy. the leading cause of death in this nation, heart disease. One of our previous shows you talked about, and it's now medically proven that you can die of a broken heart.
Yes.
There's so many different ways that the enemy wants disease in your heart. Weeds are like disease to our soil, right? We see weeds like cancer.
Yep.
Weeds like diabetes. Weeds like, help me, Dr. Dillon, what are some other weeds that might?
Well, what we see now is a lot of what we call peripheral artery disease, right? People all of a sudden, males that they lose the leg hair on their lower limbs, right? They lose circulation to their feet. You see people lose circulation to their hands because their heart is not pumping. There's too many things in the way. The arteries are getting clogged. They can't get the blood flow, the nutrients. The soil's not getting maintained or nourished the way it should from the distal extremities. So your hands, your feet, you can't walk now. You can't hold things, right? You're dropping things. You're uncoordinated because you're not watering. You're not giving the right nutrients to the soil that's needed.
And in the garden, if you look at the way God created the Garden of Eden, what's so powerful about it is each of those rivers had a function. So when by the time he created man on that sixth day, everything was created in a place of maturity. He created animals. He created the sun, the moon, the stars. We've talked about light in red light therapy, and we've talked about the rainbow, like the colors of the rainbow. We've talked about all the different lights that God provides from the sky that manifests in us in good ways, physically, emotionally, spiritually, how it matters, the green light. And the thing about the water that creates, when there's good water, we live in a desert out here. And when we finally get rain, it's as if the desert has been crying out for it. And what do we see? The moment water hits longing seeds, those seeds do exactly what they were designed to do. But if we also plant some seeds that are weeds, I think that's the stuff that we got to maybe dissect a little bit further, Dr. Dillon, because there are things that we may not always understand. Like when the wind blows, it blows everything. And the weeds cast their seeds, just like the plants and the flowers also cast their seeds.
Yep.
A good gardener will be able to get in there and determine actually what is what. And maybe you can help us define today, what are some things that mimic itself as good for us, but really aren't? There are things in our culture, you talked about it, right? The different foods that we should eat, stick to more brighter colors because maybe everything that we've thought with the oats and the grains and this and that and the other maybe aren't as great for us as we thought.
Yeah.
Right. Ultimately, I had this story, and when I had this front yard, and I used to love like keeping it all. I had grass, and I picked out these plants. I had these beautiful flowers, the bush called morning glories. That when the sun would come up, the flower would open, and then as the sun was setting, the flower would close. I loved that. I love those bushes. There was a season where in ministry I'd had like 3 weeks, 4 weeks straight where it rained a lot, and I was in a crazy busy season where I didn't get to touch my yard for 4 weeks. Well, the grass had grown like 9-10 inches. Weeds were like popping up everywhere, and I finally like I need to get a hold of this.
Yep.
It took me hours to fix that day. What was interesting was, and maybe we can dig into this, I go next to one of my morning glories. I was like, man, this thing grew like crazy. Well, I start to shape it up, but then I get really close, and I could see that there was a leaf pattern that was very slightly different. From a distant, it just all looked the same.
Yep.
The closer I dissected it, I began to realize this was a weed. And what the enemy loves to do is to plant itself right by the very purposes of your life, the things that are the most important to you, the things that you handpicked yourself, the things that are valuable to you. And then he puts on this form of godliness, if you will. He's right, the Bible calls him like a roaring lion. Everything he does is either manufactured or mimicking.
Yeah.
Right? I realized I needed to get, and when I began to pull on that weed, my whole bush moved. And I realized in the soil, that weed had wrapped its roots around my tree. It took me a couple hours to free that thing methodically without destroying the thing that was purposeful to me. How do we do that? How do we discern, especially in a culture today, from your eyes,
Mhm.
right? How do we discern what are the things that, even though cultural buzzwords say this is healthy, this is healthy, this is healthy,
Yeah.
but from what you've learned, it's going to manufacture a weed in your life.
Yeah. So what we look at, it's funny because we call it like dysmetria of thought. So it's an unhealthy or inappropriate thought pattern. And what that points to is we go into past pointing is the term we're calling it now,
Okay.
which is right. You're constantly looking back and reflecting, which can be good, right? The thought process of you look back on your past and you look at things you did wrong that you could get better at and improve on. But if you're always past pointing and see it from a negative perspective, right, that weed is now growing. It's wrapping around you and shaping you and right choking you into this point of thinking maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe, I can't do this or I can't do that, because initially looking back and working through past traumas can be good, but if you let it encompass you, it can literally take over and hijack your mind and create this weed that, again, right, then you finally start to pull the root and it shifts your whole pattern, shifts all of you, because your cerebellum, this dysmetria of thought that has occurred,
Wow.
has gotten and grown in you so deep that you believe that these past issues you've had, you can't change them because now it's redirecting your whole life.
And so then what happens is, what do you see then, how that physically, right? Because a lot of times it manufactures itself, or manifests, that's probably the better
Yeah.
word,
Mhm.
manifests physically in us.
Yes.
So then what do you typically see? What are some of the physical manifestations of those negative seeds, of those negative weeds?
It's funny you say that because as a chiropractor, I see a lot of low back and neck pain, right? That's a super common number one and two issues you go to see a chiropractor for is low back or neck pain. But what I see a lot of what we call resentment or frustration towards someone, that in Chinese medicine would say is a gallbladder problem. You hold resentment towards or anger towards somebody or something or past experiences. You get a stiff neck, you get torticollis, right? People come in, they say, "Oh, I can't turn my neck. I had this headache. It's this pressure, behind my eyes. I woke up and it was like this."
Wow.
And you're like, "What did you do?" And they say, "I didn't do anything. I went to sleep. I felt okay. I woke up. Maybe I had a bad dream or something, or maybe I had a fight with somebody the day before, but I didn't physically do anything. But I woke up and now I can't turn my neck, right? I have this constant pressure behind my head. I've taken Advil. I've taken ibuprofen. I've done all these things, but it's the thought pattern that created this physical manifestation of pain and this inability that they literally cannot turn their neck, or they have this low back pain, right? Pain going down their foot, as we call sciatica in traditional medicine, right? Maybe a gallbladder inflammation problem because, again, you're holding some type of thought pattern or thought process that is stirring this up.
Wow. So let this mind be in you that's in Christ Jesus. And what was Christ's ultimate phrase on the cross? Father, forgive them.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like maybe in some people's cases, there might be some forgiveness that needs to be offered. Maybe in some cases we have some anger, or like you said, resentment.
Yep.
Ever hear a phrase like, just even God referred to in the Old Testament the children of Israel as a stiff-necked people.
There you go.
And you know why it's interesting that now that you say that, well, I just had this thought, bro. You just said they constantly look back.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why do you think the children of Israel were called stiff-necked by God? Because they were saying it would have just been better had we stayed in Egypt.
Yeah.
At least we would have had some steak or something better to eat. For 400 years, they prayed to be delivered from slavery.
Yeah.
And the moment God delivers them and doesn't do it the way they wanted their deliverance and freedom to come,
Yep.
all of a sudden they're too busy, or we call it when we drive by an accident, rubbernecking. Because they're too busy, they're looking at, I like to say this, sometimes here's where we have to be careful, folks. We can't get so caught at staring at what we think we've lost.
Yep.
And not the ability to see where God's trying to take us.
Exactly right. Right. The weeds of the mind. If you don't clean the garden and process these things, it'll consume you. Right. Then you're constantly looking back, past issues, past traumas, past hurts, then you can't move forward.
I love what you said. You said, ever come by a rundown house that's been unkept? This is, folks, where I'm talking to myself. I'm included into this conversation. This is when we have to look internally for ourselves. This has nothing to do with, we're friends, but this has nothing to do with Dr. Dylan. This would have everything to do with Adam. What is Adam's temple looking like? What's my garden looking like? Right? Every one of us have a responsibility to tend to the garden of our heart. Why? Because the great gardener cares. He designed for our heart to flow freely, to water the very things that we need in life. But if we're too busy cutting off the water supply, and then we wonder why things are drying up, why relationships are drying up, why emotional ability to connect with somebody or people or community is drying up. It's because the weeds, it's amazing how those weeds get in there and actually, and I love the picture, an unkept house oftentimes causes you to not actually see the beauty and the landscape of the house.
Yeah.
All you see is what looks like, and you said it earlier, most people tend to think then, ooh, I don't want to go there.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to go knock on that door. I don't want to go see what's on the other side of those walls. If it looks like this outside, what does it look like inside?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing where we have to take responsibility to see what is the landscape of our relationships and our life and our health look like. The landscape. What does the landscape look like? Do you have curb appeal or does it look unkept? God cares about these things.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fascinating what we're talking about today. And I know today we're going to get into a part 2. So today's show is going to be a little bit shorter because we didn't want to try to shove all of this into one show because we still need to really dig into the temple. And there's some fascinating things in the Old Testament concerning the temple that we're not going to talk about today. You're going to have to come back for our next show. But Dr. Dylan, before we close today's show out, let's lend some encouragement to our listeners today. Because when we talk about the matters of the heart, that gets really sensitive. And God tells us, like, protect that. Protect the heart. Protect it. Physically, we know we've got to protect it because, and you can have heart attacks or you can, like you said, heart disease, those kind of things. How do we protect? Tell us how in these last few minutes from your position, if you could tell the entirety of the nation right now how to protect their heart in a practical way, medically or physically, emotionally, like the things that you know, like encourage the people today.
Yeah. So with that, there's a couple different ways to improve heart health. One is, again, limiting processed and over seed oil food, things that cause inflammation, because inflammation, again, hardens your arteries, right? As it hardens your heart, as it talks in the Bible.
Wow.
Right? That's literally what happens when you get heart disease. These other issues we see with vascular issues is it's hardening of the arteries, hardening of the vessels, hardening of these things, and it ends up in the heart, and then it gets hardened, and then it's hard to break through.
Wow.
So it all comes full circle. But to kind of speak of what you're saying is, how do we improve these things? One is through movement. You have to get different zones of cardio. We have different zones of cardio. We have zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4. Zone 1 and zone 2 is like the lower heart rates. What you can look up is called, there's a Maffetone. Dr. Phil Maffetone is a expert on exercise and heart health. He trained a lot of triathletes and people that did a lot of marathons. And what he figured out was that you can simply take 180 minus your age, and then there's some other factors based upon health conditions and so forth. But as long as you take 180 minus your age, that gives you a number. That number is kind of what you want to aim for, to get your heart rate to that number, and maintain that for 15 to 30 minutes a day, 3 times a week.
Okay.
That's an easy way, just a basic cardio. You're not getting so high that you can't talk. You can still hold a conversation.
Right.
But it's getting blood flow throughout the whole body. You're staying in the lower zones of cardiorespiratory health. And long term, that seems to be improved longevity for people. So just great circulation to the whole body. From a nutritional standpoint, making sure you eat the things that are good for you and your body, right? You said eating the rainbow, eating things of different colors, trying to limit the things that are brown. In the Bible, we talked about fish. There's a lot of fish in there for a reason, because fish oil seems to really impact breaking down cholesterol, improving fatty acid synthesis, improving the membranes, improving circulation of the heart. High dose of fish oil can thin the blood, so people that have thicker blood or thicker issues as far as hardening of the heart, the fish oil, high dose of fish oil can improve that circulation of the heart. So instead of taking aspirin or those other baby aspirins and things that people can recommend, you go the natural route and try a fish oil, something like that. You can take high doses. And then from a spiritual standpoint, find things that find connectivity within you and other people. So, right, again, I always talk about reading the Bible, finding a sense of smell that in oil. I always tell people I love to use oil, talks about in the Bible, but
Yeah.
oil kind of calms your brain down because that sense of smell, olfaction, it's a cranial nerve. It's actually the first cranial nerve, but it helps drive this remembrance pattern, a bunch of different patterns of emotional thought processes to help unlock old thought processes, but unlock new thought processes as well. So it allows you to connect to the people around you. So if you're
Yeah.
around in a good group of people and community, simply having an oil and reading the Bible just allows you to connect at a deeper level.
Wow. There you go, folks. Like, that can't be more simple. I know it requires us to take that information and to apply it, but that's practical. That's so practical. And that's what we care about on this show. We care about bringing you an understanding of God's word, how to apply it practically in our lives. And listen, he'll tell you, I'm just as much a student as you are in this with him, and he's been teaching me along the way, and I'm doing my best to get better in every one of these areas, and we hope you are too. Would you please just leave us a comment? Tell us maybe some things that you've learned. What are some things that you've learned in this journey up to this point? And hit that notification and that like bell, subscribe, share the channel with somebody, share it with people that you feel that would benefit from this information. At the end of the day, it's just our deep core, it's our deep desire to bring an enlightenment to the medical and the biblical. You know, God cares so much about your heart that even in the New Testament, we're reminded that one of the ways that we can come into a place of newness of life is to invite Jesus into our heart. What a powerful thought. What a powerful thing to know that he loves us so deeply that the garden of our soul, the gardener of our soul, actually wants to live in the very garden that he created. He wants to be the master gardener of your life. And if you haven't done that, I pray that you turn to him today. That's our desire in this show more than anything, is that you'd get to know the creator of the universe, the gardener of your heart, the one that's the keeper of your soul, the one that cares about the weeds and the issues of life. He wants you to protect that thing at all costs, but he wants you to do it his way. Mm-hmm. So we thank you for tuning in to the podcast today. We hope that you've gotten something out of this. We love you and appreciate you. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Tune into the next show. We're going to go part 2 on this. Trust me, that's not going to be a show that you want to miss. Thank you for joining the podcast today, the DNA Bodcast, where wholeness matters. Thanks for tuning in to the DNA Bodcast with Dr. Dylan Schultz and Adam Ranney. Subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss an episode. If this content serves you, like it and share it with someone pursuing greater wholeness in their life.